Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing and a happy Christmas Eve and all that business. I hope you're doing well. Let's talk about Tyson Fury some more because, of course, the last week and a half has all been all about Usyk and Fury. But let's talk about whether we consider Tyson Fury to be an all-time great heavyweight and whether he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Those are probably two separate questions because, of course, being in the Hall of Fame, there are fighters in there that I would not call all-time greats, but they, for whatever reason, they're in there. But there we go. So Tyson Fury, is he an all-time great heavyweight? Well, let's not forget that there were people, and I'm thinking specifically of the TalkSport lot, Messrs. Simon Jordan and Gareth A. Davies, who really got the kindest thing you can say about them is that they got carried away with Tyson Fury. And that's putting it politely. But because they were saying after he'd beaten Wilder, I was about to say after he'd beaten Wilder for a second time, because the first one was a draw, but I think Tyson won that. They were saying, oh, he's, the best, by far the best of his generation. And Fury himself was making the statement, I could have beaten any heavyweight in history, and therefore I am the greatest of all time, and blah, 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 blah. All right, well, let's start off by going through his career. We'll just do a quick recap. He started off doing the usual, I say journeyman, most of them were journeymen. A couple of them had reasonable records, like, Scott Belshaw and Matthew Ellis early on. They had fancy records, but neither was a much of a domestic level fighter. And in one of his early fights, what was he, 10 fights in, something like that? He fought John McDermott this was in 2009, for the English heavyweight title. At this point, Fury was promoted by Mick Hennessy, who was not one of the bigger promoters. And in fact, Hennessy picked him up when there weren't too many of the major promoters. I don't think Frank Warren was that interested in Tyson Fury to start with. The McGuigans considered promoting him, I think. But for whatever reason, he ended up with Hennessy, and Hennessy matched him for the English title. And I think it was his 10th or 11th fight, Fury, with John McDermott. And he was given, and I say given because he was given, a decision by Terry O'Connor, 98-92, right, which most people consider to be a nonsensical scorecard. I certainly do. Even if you think Fury won, it was a close fight, competitive. A lot of people think McDermott won that fight. You can make a case for Fury winning it, but a lot of people weren't happy. So they rematched later on after a few more little runaround, a couple of little journeyman runarounds by Fury. They rematched the following year, 2010, and Fury stopped McDermott in 9 rounds. It was a TKO, and McDermott was down once in the 8th and twice in the 9th. So no controversy there. And then Fury carried on, beating also-rans and people you'd never really heard of, like Nevin Pajkic put him on the floor in the second round. Big overhand right. And Nikolai Firther was another one. Fury stopped Pajkic in the 3rd round. He stopped Firther in the 5th. Then he was fighting people like Martin Rogan, who was not only... This was for the Irish title. But around about that time, David Price was being considered potentially the next big British heavyweight, not Tyson Fury. And Fury essentially ducked. He basically ducked Price, which sounds absurd now. I should, by the way, prior to this, I forgot to mention that he actually fought Derek Chisora for the British and Commonwealth titles. And Chisora was undefeated in 14, and Fury beat him over 12 rounds on points, and it was very comfortable. I definitely thought Fury won that fight, but it was Chisora's first defeat, and they'd of course meet twice later on. But having won those titles, Fury then gave them up because David Price he actually picked up both titles. But at the time, Price was considered to be a real threat. And a lot of people were picking Price to beat Fury, including me. If you'd have put, I didn't do a prediction, I didn't have a video at the time, I didn't have a YouTube channel at the time, but I was thinking, I think Price beats Fury, yeah. Because Fury had looked very, very, not just unimpressive, but lacking in discipline. He just looked like a guy who was big and didn't have a great deal of skill. In fact, it turns out that he did have a lot of skill. So sometimes you get these things wrong. But there's no doubt that Fury, probably under the tutelage of his uncle Peter, started to pick up traction and improve and make the most of his size and his abilities. Prior to that, he was trained, I think, by his uncle Huey, who passed away. So having beaten Chisora and then ducked Price, he then moved on. He had a good 12-round run around with Kevin Johnson. And then he went over to America and fought Steve Cunningham. This was in 2013. He got floored. That was in round 2. Round 2 was not a good round for Fury. But he knocked out Cunningham in 7 rounds simply by leaning on him. And Cunningham was he wasn't even a heavyweight. He'd be a very small bridgerweight today. And he was really never more than a cruiserweight, never more. And I think that was the only time Cunningham was ever stopped. But it was just the sheer size of Fury. And then Fury carried on ticking over. He beat Joey Abel in 4 rounds. He then rematched Derek Chisora. And that was for the EBU title as well as the British title. I think the Commonwealth had been given up at that point. But Fury stopped Chisora in 10 rounds. And that was a very good performance. Chisora looked a bit out of sorts, but Fury didn't allow him to get going. Box, kept him on the back foot, beat him up and stopped him in 10. It was a retirement. Don Charles pulled Derek out. Fury then had a little ticking over fight with Christian Hammer, another retirement victory over 8, and then he went to Germany to fight Wladimir Klitschko. Now, I remember thinking, when you considered everything, Klitschko, the age he was, Fury, a big man with a good jab. By this point, Fury had begun to look, pretty much world class. He was definitely improving. And the thing was that I sort of, like a lot of people, I thought he's going to go to Germany. He may well win a close decision and he'll get robbed. Or there's no way they'll give a decision to Fury over in Germany. It was in Dusseldorf. Fury will have to win every single round to stand a chance of getting a decision. Well, it looked to me like he did win most of the rounds, definitely. And he did win a 12-round decision. The cards were quite close. Well, there's a 115, 112, I think, maybe a couple of those. And then there was one that was a bit wider, 116, 111, one. Fury was deducted a point in the 11th round because of shots behind the head, rabbit punching, I think it was. And that made you think he's going to get robbed here, but he wasn't. And that remains an excellent win for Fury, excellent win. To go to Germany to fight a long-standing champion who was virtually unbeaten in nearly a decade, I think it was. And yes, I think Wladimir Klitschko's record is the way that everything was weighted in his favour for every single fight that he had, in Germany. Never mind the promotional stuff with all sorts of options on opponents and paying them chump change while Klitschko took most of the pie, and spongy canvases. And there was that absolute farce in Russia when he fought Alexander Povetkin, and he should have been thrown out. He should have been absolutely disqualified. That is one of the most disgraceful heavyweight performances and refereeing performances I have ever seen. Wladimir Klitschko being allowed to grab and maul and push down on Klitschko without being disqualified. He should have been slung out. I never liked Wladimir Klitschko as a fighter. I thought he was quite good. That sort of jab, right cross, hold thing bored me rigid. Can you argue that he's a great fighter? Well, he was good at what he did, but don't ask me to watch him. And it was such a dour era for the heavyweight division. But along comes Tyson, upsets the apple cart, Klitschko at the time had 64 wins and 3 defeats, so they had a sterling record. And yes, he was knocking on a bit, but it was still a great performance to go over there and do it. And so Tyson suddenly goes from being someone who was being floored by, Evan Pajkic and, winning controversial decisions over John McDermott to beating Wladimir Klitschko and looking like he was on top of the world. And then it all went wrong. He made some stupid comments after the fight, supposedly hiding behind religion, which a lot of bigots do, or a lot of people who make bigoted comments do. I won't call Fury a bigot because that's not fair. I don't know whether he is or isn't, but he certainly made some very stupid comments. And he disappeared, he had his mental health issues and all this business, and there was failed drug tests, and you know the story. So he was out for about 2.5 years, just over 2.5 years. He came back, and who does he fight? Sefer Fury. No one's ever heard of Sefer Fury. I don't think I had at the time. I think he was classed as the second best cruiserweight in wherever he's from. Is it Croatia he's from? I can't remember. He never did anything before or since fighting Fury. He retired after 4 rounds. He was tiny compared to Fury. Fury then got a 10-round decision over Francisco Pianeta, who was never any great shakes. And yeah, he got 10 rounds in, I suppose you could say. He went the 10-round distance, box, won every round. So he shed a bit of ring rust. And then, out of the blue, in 2018, he fights Deontay Wilder. And again, he had a point taken off in the 11th round for punches behind the head, which was the same as against Klitschko. So he's not averse to a little bit of naughtiness. Or did he? No. Oh, am I thinking of another fight? Aren't I? No, he didn't have a point taken. Why am I thinking that Fury had points taken off against Wilder? Am I wrong about that? Am I remembering this wrong? I probably am. Scratch that last comment. Okay, so he went over there. He got floored. He certainly got floored in the 9th, and of course the 12th round there was that resurrection moment when he sort of got off. He was completely out cold, looking up at the lights, and suddenly he woke up, and he actually won the rest of the round, and he got a draw. It was a split draw. I thought Fury won that fight, no question. And it was, all things considered, the fact that he'd had 2 fights against Sefer Fury and Pianeta in 3.5 years or whatever it was, it was a fantastic performance, and one that he deserved to win but didn't. And that, of course, was in America. So that was the second time he went abroad to fight a champion in their backyard. He then has a farcical little runaround, not even a runaround, it was over in 2 rounds against Tom Schwartz, which, by the way, was on pay-per-view. Can you believe that? Tyson Fury versus Tom Schwartz on pay-per-view. And Frank Warren, who only a year or two had been slagging Eddie Hearn off for some of the pay-per-views he was putting together. You know my opinion on pay-per-view. I'm not going to go into that again. I never buy pay-per-views. I watch it using other means. But the idea that Tom Schwartz is a viable pay-per-view opponent, and Frank Warren saying, well, it's got to be done, we need the money. All right, well, shut up, Frank, and stop being such a stinking hypocrite. You were slagging off Hearn for the pay-per-views. We do it for the fans. We do it yeah, that's right. You charge pay-per-view money for Tom fucking Schwartz. Give your head a wobble, mate. But it was 2 rounds of nothingness. Then Fury had another scare. We had a scare against Otto Wallin, one of the biggest scares of his career. He won a 12-round decision. He was badly cut from a punch, and even though he won the fight wide, I can't remember. I think I had it about 116, 112 or something like that. And the judges had it roughly. I think one of them had it. He gave Fury about 9 or 10 rounds. But anyway, whatever the scores were, Fury did collect a cut that needed over 40 stitches in it. So it was a very bad cut, and probably that fight would have been stopped if it had not been Tyson Fury and not been a big fight, because they were setting the table for a rematch between Fury and Deontay Wilder, which happened. Now, I thought that I picked Deontay Wilder to win the first fight with Fury, and I was wrong. It was a draw. And I picked him to win the second fight with Fury. Nothing could be further from the truth, because Fury, to be honest, I think this might just be his best performance. He jumped all over Wilder. Wilder was a huge hitter, but had very very basic skills. He did jab a lot better than people give him credit for, because he would set up that big, high twitch muscle right hand, but yeah, he got smashed up basically by Fury and stopped in 7 rounds. There was all sorts of fabricated controversy from Wilder. He got rid of Mark Breland, who was the only one who seemed to actually give a damn about his welfare. And yeah, you know the story. I mean, it was some of the crap that came out of Wilder's mouth is, and this is saying something, was probably as bad or maybe even worse in some respects than some of the crap that comes out of Tyson Fury's mouth. My God, that is saying something. But fair play to Fury. That was a great performance, and he won that fight, very, very impressively, I think. I didn't predict that. I didn't predict that he'd dominate Wilder and knock him out in 7 rounds. And then that was in 2020, early to February, March 2020, and then at the back end of, was it September, October, November, that sort of time, they had a third fight. Now this was about 18 months or more later. Now this, in the interim period, there was a lot of talk of finally Fury fighting Joshua, and Eddie Hearn spent God knows how long running around all sorts of countries trying to organise stuff, trying to get it done. And then Eddie Hearn said he phoned Bob Arum up, and Bob Arum said, "Oh, by the way, fight's off. Fury's got to fight Wilder for a third time. It's been ordered by the court because there was a rematch clause for the second fight." And Hearn was like, "What? What, you mean I've just spent the last 4 or 5 months trying to organise it?" So they pulled the wool over Eddie's eyes. And you know what Arum's like, he hates Hearn. Warren at the time hated Hearn. So they kind of had it over on him. And no one really wanted to see a third Wilder fight. But I tell you what, it was a great fight. Neither man looked good, technically good in it. Wilder was down in rounds 3, 10 and 11. 11th was the knockout round. But Fury was also down twice in the 4th round. And it was very interesting, the second knockdown when Fury was sitting there on the canvas and the camera was straight looking at him. And I got the feeling he's not going to get up. He's thinking about getting up. Can I really be bothered with this? I've made millions. Do I really need this? But he did get up, and he won. He won the fight. He knocked him out in the 11th round. It was, after that round, it was pretty much one-way traffic. But Wilder showed immense heart, immense guts in that fight, really proved himself to be a fighting man. Got knocked out in the 11th, but, I mean, he probably showed more in that fight in terms of courage, determination, proving what a worthy heavyweight he was in that defeat than he did in all of those largely meaningless title defenses. I mean, he's one of the most protected heavyweight champions in the history of the sport, I think, right up there with, put it this way, at least, I was going to say Floyd Patterson, but at least he ended up fighting Liston twice, or trying to fight him, got knocked out twice in a round, but, Anyway, after that, Fury, this is when, after the second Fury fight, and certainly after the third one, you Gareth A. Davies and Simon Jordan and lots of other people, the Fury fanboys, should we say, were in full flight. He's the greatest ever. He's by far the best in his era. What does he need to fight Anthony Joshua for? Who cares about Anthony Joshua? Joshua lost to Ruiz. Tyson doesn't need to fight him. He's great. He's the greatest. Complete bullshit, of course, because as good as the wins against Klitschko in Germany and Wilder in America are, you need something called depth in your resume, okay? You need, at any point, to be considered a great fighter or even dominant in your era, you need to look at the top 10 contenders and pick them off. And I did a video a couple of years ago, I can't remember when it was, a couple of years ago maybe, going through the top 10 of the IBF, the WBC, WBA and WBO and Ring Magazine rankings. And I think the most that you could pick that Tyson had faced in the top 10 was 3 or maybe 4 in one of the rankings. In some of them, it was only 2, which would be Wilder and Klitschko, I think. I don't know. Was it Klitschko? Yeah. No, Wallin and Wilder. So he hadn't built his resume up. He'd had a couple of extremely good wins, but the resume was lacking. It was very, very thin. And Dillian Whyte had been WBC mandatory contender for I don't know, 2 years, was it? I can't even remember. I know it seemed like about 10 years. He got knocked flat by an old Povetkin, which he was winning that fight, but he got knocked flat with a single uppercut. He then came back, knocked out Povetkin in a round less, and it's 4 rounds. He got knocked out in 5. He knocked Povetkin out in 4. So you're now talking about finally getting a shot at the title. This was in 2022, and we know that the dreadful undercard, pay-per-view again, wasn't it? Awful undercard. Nick Ball was the only good thing about that undercard, smashing up Isaac Lowe. But yeah, Fury knocks out Whyte with a uppercut. What else? Whyte's 3 defeats have been through uppercuts. And then before the end of the year, who does he fight? Who does he choose to fight? I don't even like the phrase cherry pick, but if ever there was somebody picking an easy opponent, it's this. Derek Chisora. Can you believe it? They put Derek Chisora in a 3rd time on pay-per-view. Oh, my God. This guy fleeces his rather extremely gullible fans, naive fans, stupid fans for massive amounts of money. I think this was the most expensive pay-per-view in UK boxing history. But anyway, he fights Derek Chisora again, based on the fact that Chisora had eked out, and I mean, I thought Pulev won that fight, but he'd got a decision over Kubrat Pulev, who himself was, in his late 30s, I think. Seen much better days. Was a good fighter in his prime, but had seen far better days. And predictably, Fury stops Dillian Whyte in 10 rounds, same as the last time they fought. The most unnecessary trilogy in boxing history, heavyweight boxing history. He then takes on Francis Ngannou in 2023, a debutant who gives the best performance of any debutant ever, loses a split decision to the supposed lineal champion, whatever that means, however you define that. I've always thought that's a complete bullshit term anyway. And I never thought, I don't think he may, for all I, depends how you slice and dice it. I never thought he was the lineal champ. But anyway, Ngannou floors Fury, takes him down to the wire. Fury wins a decision. I do think Fury won that fight. I think it should have been unanimous because I think most of the rounds Fury won. He just got floored and he looked crap, looked out of shape, and he was crap. But he was still not toying with him, but beating a novice. Ngannou, fair play to the man. That was only a 10-rounder as well. I don't know whether Fury's WBC belt was on the line. I hope not, if it's a 10-rounder. But anyway, he then faced Alexander Usyk twice. We know what happened there. All but knocked out in round 9. Only the ropes kept him up. I thought it was a competitive fight, the first fight. I don't hold with the idea that Usyk won most of the rounds. I think he won clearly, but Fury did give him some problems in that fight. Likewise, the second fight, I had it like all 3 judges, 116, 112. When I scored it live, Fury again very competitive, but definitely most rounds to Usyk for me personally. So what do we make of that resume? Do we think that Tyson Fury is an all-time great? I would say that he is a very, very good heavyweight when he's on it. I think what works against him is the thinness of his resume. All right. I don't think there's any shame in losing twice to Usyk because Usyk is an immense fighter who would have competed at the absolute top level in any era. I've heard people say, Usyk couldn't have lived in the 80s, the 90s. Absolute bullshit. Usyk is a generational talent. People who say things like that didn't live through the 90s or the 80s or whatever, or the 60s or the 70s. They just assume that whatever's around now isn't as good as what went before. They look at history through rose-tinted spectacles, okay? I don't remember the 70s, but I definitely remember the 80s, watching boxing in the 80s and certainly the 90s. So I was in my 20s in the 90s. And they were, well, the 80s, not so much. You had, Holmes was dominant, but there weren't that many great contenders. I know people talk about, they say that there was talent around, but they weren't maximising it because King had sort of mopped them all up and was ripping them all off, and a lot of them were out of shape. And then Mike Tyson came along towards the end of it. The 80s was good. It was a good era, yeah. The 90s was very good. And you know what? This era, even though we're coming to the end of it now with AJ and Fury coming to the end of their careers, or on the back end of their careers, this has been a very, very good era too. Very good era. An underrated era that will only be appreciated further down the line, because that's what happens, because people are like that. They regard cynicism as being the same as skepticism. They're two very different things. So I think he was a very good heavyweight in a good era of Tyson Fury. But what prevents me from calling him an all-time great is he just didn't face enough of his contenders. This is not Muhammad Ali facing anyone and everyone. This is not, even Joe Louis, even though the quality of his opposition was often, very questionable, bum of the month club and everything, he ruled for 11 years. Was it 26 title defences? I think Fury is a very, very good heavyweight. And his key wins, which were Klitschko and Wilder, definitely deserve a lot of credit, especially as they were done on the road. But the whole notion that he is an all-time great who belongs in the top 5, absolutely not. Top 10, that's pushing it. No, I wouldn't say top 10. Top 15, 20, maybe top 20, maybe top 20. I'm thinking about all of them. Because there are heavyweights who never won the world title, who are still exceptional fighters. There are heavyweight champions who weren't even heavyweights, like Gezard Charles, really just a light heavyweight. Gene Tunney, really just a light heavyweight. So, this is obviously subjective, but in my opinion, Fury's resume suffers because he just didn't face enough top 10 contenders. I mean, the idea, and to listen to Frank Warren saying that the only fighter available was Derek Chisora back in 2022. None of the others were available. None of the others, generated any money. I mean, what absolute bullshit. Are you telling me, Frank, that Tyson Fury versus Tom Schwartz on pay-per-view, that was a worthy pay-per-view fight? But you couldn't find anyone else other than a completely shop-worn Derek Chisora who'd eked out a wafer-thin decision over Kubrat Pulev, putting him in and charging record pay-per-view for that fight? I mean, Frank, you're so full of shit, mate. You really are absolutely full of shit. Yeah, in my opinion, no, an all-time great, I don't think so. Now, some people are going to say, what about Usyk then? He hasn't had many heavyweight title fights. Is he an all-time great? Yes, I think he is. Because he in such a short space of time as a heavyweight, he twice beat Anthony Joshua, who was regarded as one of the dominant heavyweights in the era. He twice beat Tyson Fury. These are all legitimate wins that should have been unanimous decisions, right? And also, he did it having come up from unified a very, very strong cruiserweight era, unified that, and he's done it all in 23 fights. So that to me is an all-time great, without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, Fury, his career, his professional career, solely as a heavyweight, has now been going for 16 years. We're into the 17th year next year, anyway. All right, and if you take out Wilder and Klitschko, and obviously Usyk, who beat him twice, there ain't a lot there. So that works heavily against him. Longevity is not just hanging around for a long time. Longevity is consistently fighting people. The reason Muhammad Ali, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, is the greatest heavyweight of all time, bar none, it's because of he dominated two entire eras, okay, and he won. He beat Liston. When he was a rank underdog, people expected Liston to smash through him. He beat Foreman when Foreman was regarded as this big, unbeatable savage, as caveman. Muhammad Ali, what else do you want him to do? Some of the people who never won world titles but were absolute killers, like Ernie Shavers. Shavers was vulnerable. You could hurt him and stop him, but Christ, he hit like an absolute freight train. All right, from one of, if not the hardest single punch hitters in heavyweight history. Ali beat him. Fury's done nothing even approaching that. Nothing even approaching it. But he is a very, very good heavyweight. I just don't think he maximised his talent, his ability. He maximised his earning potential. He's made a couple of 100 million or whatever the hell, I don't even know what it is. But yeah. But in terms of legacy, and regardless of what he says, he does care about legacy. You can see it. He definitely cares about legacy. Otherwise he wouldn't have ducked so many people. He ducked Usyk for 18 months or whatever it was. He clearly ducked the man. Usyk was have gloves will travel. He's won everything on the road. Everything he possibly can win, he's won on, and he's done it on the road in 23 fights. That's greatness. Tyson Fury, no. Very good fighter. Great skills for such a big man. But an all-time great, in my opinion, no. All right. Now, you may disagree. And if you do disagree, that's absolutely fine. But I want you to leave your comments below and explain to me why you disagree, what you actually think. Why am I wrong and you are right? I ain't got a problem with you disagreeing with me. We'll have a chat about it. Be respectful. Leave your comments below. All good. All right. Anyway, thank you for this very long video, half an hour plus. I very rarely do videos that go over 20 minutes. This is over 30 minutes. But thank you very much for sticking with me. Comments below. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new and give the like button a good old right cross and all. Or a jab if you're a southpaw. I'm not fussy. And Merry Christmas to all of you. Much love. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.